prescribe unjust minimum wages, which can barely sustain a family on cheap, genetically modified foods. We recognize the futility of praying about state capture while the resources of the country remain firmly captured in past economic injustices. We recognize the futility of offering thoughts and prayers in the aftermath of the rapes and murders of the lesbians in this country when we judge, based on our sacred texts and cultural beliefs, same love to be unnatural, instead of recognizing that love is kind and patient and knows not judgment. Love is indeed divine. We recognize the futility of building shelters for battered women while we still preach that the man is the head of the home. We recognize the futility of prayers for reconciliation when there's little action for reparation. Indeed, we recognize, God most compassionate, that there is little use for thoughts and prayers when death and destruction are already before us. Help us, therefore, dear God, to concern ourselves more with life before death than worry about life after death. Give us the courage, our Creator, to supplement, strengthen, and sustain our thoughts and prayers with policy and change, with active agitation for a world of equity, dignity, and truth, and a yearning for peace that's not simply the absence of war, but the presence of justice. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Thank you, Professor, for the prayer. Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue to our next speaker, I did realize that when we were singing Happy Birthday, some people were looking at the front because they were not aware that, in actual fact, the great man is amongst us. And in actual fact, he is not alone. He is with his family. And so it is my honor then, ladies and gentlemen, to please request, so that you can at least see where they are, the Tutu family that's present today, to just stand up and be recognized. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we'll move on to our next speaker for the evening. It is then my honor to introduce to you Professor Pamela Dube, who is the Deputy Vice Chancellor at the University of the Western Cape.
Thank you, Program Director. Archbishop Desmond and Mrs. Leah Tutu, family members of Archbishop Tutu, all our honored guests present here this evening, the Mayor of the City of Cape Town, Mrs. Patricia de Lille, Mr. David Buzzard, U.S. Embassy in Kinshasa, Ms. Virginia Blazer, U.S. Consul General in Cape Town, Mr. Christian Brandel, Honorary Consulate of the Republic of Vanuatu, Mr. Nikolai Zaharescu, and Ms. Laura Cosmina Lonescu, Consulate General of Romania here in Cape Town, Ms. Lydia Indrenchavi, and Ms. Jean Nelson Vavara, Consulate General of Madagascar, Mr. Andreas Mager and Mrs. Claudine Mager, Consulate General of Switzerland, Mr. Edward Roman, British Consulate General, Mr. Mbulelo Bikwani, the CEO of the Desmond and Leah Tutu Foundation, Advocate Vasu Gounden, the founder of Accord and executive director of Accord. Dr. Sarojini Nada, the UWC Desmond Tutu Spirituality Center. Dr. Malene Leroux, the CEO of Escape and board member of Desmond and Leah Tutu Foundation. UWC alumni, student leadership, students, partners, friends and partners of the Desmond and Leah Tutu Foundation, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure and an honor to welcome you to the 7th Desmond Tutu International Peace Lecture on behalf of our Rector and Vice Chancellor, Professor Tyrone Pretorius, who unfortunately is unable to be with us this evening. It is also my honor to wish the Archbishop a happy 86th birthday on behalf of the UWC community. Our university community has been blessed for many decades with a close relationship with the Archbishop and the Tutu family. As our Chancellor from 1988 to 2011, the Archbishop rendered almost 25 years of selfless service to UWC, particularly during apartheid, when the institution was an intense site of struggle against an unjust regime. We also have the UWC Desmond Tutu Spirituality Center under the leadership of Dr. Sarojini Nada to honor and pursue his legacy. We are thus very fortunate that our relationship has continued with these peace lectures held in conjunction with the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation. The lectures, always enriching and thought-provoking, also provide us with the opportunity to reflect on the immense contribution that the Archbishop has made, not only to the well-being of our nation, but also to a community of global citizens. As former President Nelson Mandela has said about his friend, I quote, "Sometimes strident, often tender, never afraid, and seldom without humor, Desmond Tutu's voice will always be the voice of the voiceless." End quote. That tender, unafraid voice speaking on behalf of the voiceless was heard just a few weeks ago when the Archbishop wrote an open letter to Aung San Suu Kyi, his fellow Nobel Peace Prize laureate. He asked her then to break her silence on the atrocities committed against the Myanmar Rohingya minorities. My dear sister, the Archbishop wrote, "If the political price of your ascension to the highest office in Myanmar is your silence, the price is surely too steep. A country that is not at peace with itself, that fails to acknowledge and protect the dignity and worth of all its people, is not a free country." End quote. It is words such as these and the manner in which they are conveyed that makes us appreciate the exemplary role that the Archbishop has played and continues to play in our lives. His is a voice that does not falter or fall silent in difficult times. Instead, the Archbishop reminds us so powerfully that retiring from public life does not mean retiring from one's conscience, faith, and moral purpose. For that, we thank you, Archbishop. With this, I take the opportunity to welcome our guest speaker, Advocate Vasu Gounden again, and welcome all of you, ladies and gentlemen, to the 7th Desmond Tutu International Peace Lecture. May this be a truly memorable and remarkable evening for all of us. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if you are aware of the word that goes around where people, when you're talking about things, they say levels. Yeah, one of my greeting, did you see my greeting? It was audience and everyone else, good evening. Yeah, when you reach prof status, you must move. You must show your caliber. You can't just stand there. You must look like a prof. You must act like a prof. Now, ladies and gentlemen, during the course of these weeks, as I was told that I would be the master of ceremony for this event, I was, let's just say I was called into the office of Ubabumbulelo Bigwane. And I tend to think I was summoned. As I enter the offices, we have things with our grace in our culture. Yabona Gray doesn't need to say anything. He just needs to say, Mfoam. Then you know you're not allowed to mess up on the day. Doesn't need to say it. That's all he needs to say. Mfoam. I say this, ladies and gentlemen, because I spoke to the orchestra asking them what songs they were going to perform today. And the next, one that they were going to perform, I tried to pronounce it. And I thought, I remember Mfoam. It's not happening. So that's not going to work. So I asked them, okay, tell me about the song. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the tango song. I don't know if you've seen the movie, Center for Women. Yes. And so I said to the orchestra, but you should have said that from the beginning. Why is that with these names? Ladies and gentlemen, please do enjoy this next item from our orchestra. Ladies and gentlemen, I do believe that warranties another round of applause. That was beautiful. They say there is some music that you don't even need to know the words to, but it speaks to your soul. Nonetheless, I'm going to tell because he said he didn't say I mustn't tell you. So while I'm sitting next to him, Ubabu Bigwane, while he's listening to the song, and I saw a couple of you in the audience, he was like, Fanam, in my time, in my time. Oh, but I saw a couple of you also doing it. I saw a couple of you doing it, but nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, then it is my honor then to introduce the CEO of the Desmond and Tutu Legacy Foundation, who will then be standing to introduce our guest speaker for the evening. No, I wanted you to stand here next to me, Babumbulelo Bikwane, so that if you want to tell them that I was not telling the truth, you can say it while I'm here.
Thank you very much, Program Director. In the past 6 months, the foundation has been busy at work, trying to really look at its strategic direction and its position in world affairs, not just in South African affairs, in world affairs. And out of those discussions and engagements that have been happening internally with the staff and with the board, it came out with pillars that it believed will inform the legacy of the Archbishop. And those 5 pillars are accountable servant leadership, Ubuntu, social justice, reconciliation, and peace. And I'm naming peace at the end because that's what the speaker of today is going to talk about. And there is no better person to really come and talk about peace than a person who himself has been a practitioner in the area of conflict resolution and peace. Advocate Vasu Gounden was an anti-apartheid activist, student leader, human rights lawyer, and is presently a globally recognized conflict management expert. He was president of the SRC at the University of Durban-Westville during the state of emergency in 1985-86, and was jailed and stood trial for his political activism. Over the last 25 years, he has emerged as a global leader in developing the field of conflict management, establishing the African Center for Constructive Resolution of Disputes, ACCORD, in 1992, and Global Peace in 2015. During this time, he has worked in some of the most protracted and violent conflicts in Africa, including Burundi, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Somalia, and Sudan. He has prepared conflicting parties in negotiations and supported the mediation efforts of former presidents Obasanjo of Nigeria, Masire of Botswana, Chisano of Mozambique, former presidents Mandela and Mbeki of South Africa, and the current South African president, His Excellency President Jacob Zuma. Over the last 35 years, Gounden has made a consistent and continuous contribution to South Africa and Africa in advancing democracy, human rights, peace, and nation building. He was recognized in 2000 by the World Economic Forum as one of its global leaders of tomorrow for his work in conflict management, and he was awarded with an honorary doctorate in social sciences by the University of KwaZulu-Natal in 2016 for his contribution over the last 25 years to the field of peace and security. I will now call upon Advocate Gounden to address the audience.
Dear Arch, dear Malaya, let me thank you for this great privilege, not only to address this esteemed audience, but more importantly, to address our nation and the world at large. Arch, you have and continue to be an inspiration to many of us who labor each day to emulate your drive, your passion, and your compassion. In the dark days of apartheid, your brave voice stood out among the many silent voices, and we could hear your voice come across the Drakensberg Mountains into KwaZulu-Natal, and it inspired us. It gave us solidarity, and as we marched against the forces of apartheid, the dogs, the tear gas, the bullets, your voice gave us comfort. That there was always someone braver, a moral compass we could follow. For that, we thank you, Arch. Dear Arch, you may wonder why I chose at this juncture in our history to talk about the choice between civil war and civil peace. 30 years ago, almost a generation and a half, on the morning of the 22nd of January 1987, while serving as a young article clerk with a law firm in Durban, I was asked to accompany one of my principals, the late Mr. Archie Gomeda, whom you, Arch, know very well, and who was then one of the 3 presidents of the United Democratic Front. He asked me to accompany him to an area called Kwamakuta, where on the previous evening, several women and children were massacred. There on that morning, I saw a very elderly man break down in tears. Almost 30 years later, I sit on the Morane Commission listening to the loved ones of victims of political killings in KwaZulu-Natal, and I see their trauma. I listened recently to the wife of the municipal manager of Richmond, Sibusiso Sitoli, recount how, as a couple, they supported 5 young children. They paid for their education, and these were not their children. She told us how Sibusiso had obtained his degree in finance and how he was studying towards another degree. And then she broke down and told us how Sibusiso was gunned down because he stood against corruption. And I ask myself, what has possessed us as a nation that power, patronage, and greed can drive us to kill each other? How did our dream of a vibrant democracy, of healthy political competition, turn to political intolerance? Intolerance that denies the children their fathers and mothers. Compatriots, this is how our low-intensity civil war started in the 1980s. We are edging dangerously towards that precipice again. I have seen this picture before, the killing of political opponents for power and greed in so many countries, and it will be a fatal mistake to believe that we are any different. That is why I have chosen, dear Arch, to question whether we as a nation will choose civil peace or allow ourselves to be led into civil war. Master of Ceremonies, Your Worship, the Mayor of Cape Town, Honorable Patricia de Lille, Speaker of the National Assembly, Baleka Mbete, Chairperson of the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation, Marlene Leroux, CEO of the Desmond and Leah Tutu Foundation, Mr. Mbuleleo Bekweni and your family, Professor Pamela Dube, DVC of the University of the Western Cape, ministers and deputy ministers, members of the diplomatic community, fellow South Africans. At the outset, let me beg the indulgence of those of you here who are not South Africans and ask that you forgive me for addressing my fellow South Africans directly. Fellow South Africans, compatriots, we have fought a brave struggle. We have won a bittersweet freedom, and we are slowly building a nation. Our nation is a work in progress, and like the many nations who make up this world of ours, there comes a time when its people reach a crossroad and have to make choices. Many nations have been at that crossroad and have had to make difficult choices. Some have made wise choices and they continue to reap the benefits of that wise choice. The ambassador of Norway, Trine Skaimund, is here amongst us today, and we know that her country, Norway, under difficult conditions and harsh conditions, made wise choices. And they enjoy those wise choices today. And still many fellow South Africans, many countries in the world have made poor choices that have led to death and destruction. Fellow South Africans, we are today as a nation standing at the crossroad, and this historic moment in our long nation-building journey demands of us to make choices. All of us, black and white, rich and poor, young and old, male and female, Christian, Muslim, Jew and Hindu, leftists and liberals, capitalists and communists. All of us have to consciously make choices that will determine the country we will continue to live in, or the country many will be forced to flee from. Compatriots, today we have a choice to make between civil war or civil peace. Compatriots, this will not be the first time that we will be standing at the precipice of a civil war. We were fast edging towards a civil war in the late 80s, and nobody was certain who was going to win that war, but what was certain was that millions of our people would have been killed. At that time, the apartheid state had amassed a formidable military and security apparatus. The liberation forces were driven with equal determination. Internal civil unrest was at its peak, and the country was fast becoming ungovernable. The then President F.W. de Klerk had a choice to use his government's military and security apparatus to go to war against the liberation forces or enter into a dialogue. He chose dialogue. Nelson Mandela, despite the growing internal resistance and a determination amongst many of us, his followers, to engage the security forces of the apartheid regime, he made the choice to lead his followers into dialogue with the apartheid regime. Both leaders went against vast numbers of their followers, who at the time preferred to continue with the war. Their choice led us out of civil war. Also at the time, two other leaders who had the potential to disrupt both the dialogue process and the first inclusive democratic elections Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, leader of the Inkatha Freedom Party, and General Constant Viljoen, leader of a right-wing faction, made the choice to lead their followers into the election and consequently contributed to leading our country out of a civil war. Each of these leaders had gravitas amongst their followers. Each of them had a cause their followers would have been prepared to die for. The country was awash with weapons, and there were many fault lines of race, ethnicity, and class present. Their choices did not give us a perfect constitution. It did not produce all the solutions that would have eradicated poverty, unemployment, and inequality. Their choices avoided a civil war in our country and gave us civil peace, a stable platform on which to build a new South Africa. Fellow South Africans, we have to be grateful to those leaders and the hundreds of others who worked alongside them to deliver our negotiated peace, including the esteemed mayor of this city. They gave us our inclusive democratic elections and our consensus constitution. We have to be grateful because they spared us a full-scale civil war, which we as a nation were very capable of sliding towards. For those who were not born or were too young to know, and for those among us who may have forgotten, or those who choose not to remember, let me show you a short clip from a documentary called A Bloody Miracle that looks at the 13 months before our elections. And ladies and gentlemen, fellow South Africans, these are not dramatized events. This is actual footage. And I have to say that some of this footage is fairly gruesome, so I'd like to warn you in advance, but this is us in South Africa.
Years of imprisonment could not stamp out our determination to be free.
This is the start of a civil war.
A civil war is on already.
Vehicles were torched and property set ablaze.
Tear gas burst the mob. The crowds marched.
A whole lot of bloody bodies. Just talking doesn't help.
This is civil war, man. This is civil war. This is the start of a civil war.
ANC gangs fighting fierce battles within Carter gunmen in the Johannesburg township.
The situation was very bad. I had to leave school, fight. Here in Thokoza, it was a war because it was an everyday thing. You live about gun, you sleep with gun, you eat with gun. If it's not with you, it's with your friends near you. So it was war because nothing else mattered at that time. The commander has been shot, and has been shot by the white person, you know, and now you don't think proper. You know, everything that we are talking about now is about war. There will be a civil war. Then we will fight. We will kill the white people.
Whatever happens, we are prepared to vote. Even if a bomb can come, we're going to sit here. We're prepared to die, but we are going to vote.
That, fellow South Africans, is the path we avoided. That was 1993, 1 year before our election. that scene at Johannesburg, then Johannesburg International Airport, was on election day. It's the path that we avoided because we chose civil peace over civil war. Just take a minute to think where we would be if we made the wrong choice. If we chose to escalate our low-intensity civil war into a full-scale civil war. Now, if you have not experienced, as we have not experienced in South Africa, a full-scale civil war, it may be difficult to imagine one. So let me assist you. My colleagues and I at Accord have spent the last 25 years being a first-hand witness to the death and destruction of civil war. Now, I have to say that we had produced some really graphic images, and I respect the sentiments of the foundation that asked us to exclude some of those images, because they were extremely gruesome images of young people who had been killed. And I thought that maybe South Africans need to see that. They need to understand, we need to understand just how bad it can get. So in 1993, we hosted the Secretary General of the Rwandan Patriotic Front, Dr. Theogene Rudasingwa, in Durban for talks on the situation in Rwanda. Several months later, he spent a night in Durban. Several months later, in a killing frenzy driven by politicians who engaged in hate speech, 800,000 people were killed in 3 months. I have been to Rwanda. I was fortunate to go with the late Justice Pius Langa, and we were taken by the Rwandan government to see some of the places in which these people were massacred. They took us to a church where people had sought refuge, and the clothes were still on the ground. You could smell the death in the air. They took us to a place where they had kept all the bones and the skulls of the people who had been killed, just to remind people, their own people, the rest of us, that that's where we should not go. 3 months. Think of a stadium, 80,000 people. Now think of 10 stadiums with 800,000 people. In 3 months. That was Rwanda. In 1997, our deputy, who is present here today, Mr. Jerome Sachani, and I, together with Professor Jakes Hervel, the then chair of our board at Accord and former vice chancellor of the University of the Western Cape, this esteemed home of the left, as he called it then, went to Mogadishu. The three of us landed in Mogadishu, Somalia, which was then in the grip of a civil war. We spent 5 days crisscrossing Mogadishu, being ferried around at high speed by heavily armed warlords supported by small bands of drugged young militants. Think of Niobe on steroids. Think of our young people today. That's those young people in Somalia then, drugged and being manipulated by warlords. Almost 20 years later, Somalia is still in the grip of an armed civil war. Life as we know it has stood still in Somalia. These are pictures of before and after in Somalia. That's what you're witnessing. We as Accord, we are still engaged in Somalia today. The African Union has a peacekeeping force in Somalia. You cannot move around Mogadishu because you would be killed. This is 1992 when the civil war started. In the late 90s, we received several delegations at Accord from Sri Lanka, both from the government of Sri Lanka and the so-called Liberation Tigers, who were fighting a long war for independence. The civil war claimed over 150,000 lives in 3 decades of civil war. In 2012, Mr. Aziz Pahad, former Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of South Africa and now Senior Political Advisor to Accord, and I spent 5 days in Syria, speaking to government officials, judges, militant groups, and civil society activists to encourage them to negotiate a solution to their problems. Then, the protesters were throwing stones, like they do in South Africa today. A year later, those stones became heavy caliber weapons and tanks, and today we see the destruction of a once beautiful country, and their people are refugees all around the world. After fighting a war with Sudan for over 20 odd years, the South Sudanese celebrated their independence on the 9th of July 2011. Having worked with both the Sudanese and South Sudanese to bring peace to this part of the world, we also traveled to the capital of Juba, South Sudan, for the independence celebrations. I remember driving around the city on the eve of independence and witnessing the jubilation of the people, the screams of joy, the people emotionally hugging each other, singing and dancing until the early hours of the morning like we did on the eve of our own elections. The whole world came to celebrate with South Sudan. And today, they are in the midst of an armed civil war for the last 4 years. And ironically, let me repeat, ironically, this civil war started with divisions in the ruling party. The Sudanese People's Liberation Movement. I have used these examples because I have personal experience of them, and as the examples from Syria, Sri Lanka, and Ukraine indicate, this is not just an African problem, but it is a human problem. In the last several decades, we have seen similar bloody civil wars in Europe, Asia, and Latin America. Most of the leaders who have led their people into a civil war are generally driven by narrow sectarian interests. What they have in common is their ability to convince and sometimes to manipulate their followers. Often blinded by their narrow interests, they abandon their moral compass and ability to think long-term and think of the consequences of their actions. Or if they do understand the consequences, their own interests generally outweigh the consequences. They become selfish to the point of being irrational, and they drag their people into war that generally lasts for over 20 years. Imagine your lives. Just imagine for a minute your lives disrupted for the next 20 years. Imagine you and your families without jobs, becoming a refugee, fleeing over borders with very little possessions and living in squalid conditions in other countries. Don't think that it won't happen to us in South Africa. Fellow South Africans, the question we have to ask ourselves today is whether a civil war is possible in South Africa. Can we destroy this beautiful country that we have built? From my experience, both in South Africa and globally, I unfortunately have to say that a civil war is not only possible in South Africa, it is highly possible in South Africa. Now let me say, equally emphatically, while time is running out rapidly, all of us, not just the government, have the ability, the resources, and the intellect to ensure that we don't go down that path. The question is whether we have the political will, the commitment, the sense of oneness as a nation, the resilience, the honesty and the integrity, and most of all, the compassion and empathy to come together as a nation and work hard and work selflessly with the utmost urgency to take the path of civil peace. When you leave here today, these are the questions you need to ask yourself. These are the questions all our leaders at all levels need to ask themselves, and especially those who want to lead us. To them, let me say, leadership is not a coveted crown for the accumulation of wealth. It is an extra pair of hands to uplift the poor. Fellow South Africans, our problems today are grave and compounding themselves each day. Let us not be mistaken. They start with the legacy we inherited from apartheid, where the bulk of our nation's resources were used to socially engineer skills, capital, and opportunity for a minority, and this has left us with huge distortions in our society. Those who conveniently seek to deny the impact and effect of decades of discriminatory policies under apartheid on today's crisis, those do themselves and our nation a great disservice. Equally so, compatriots, those who conveniently lay the blame for all our problems at the doorstep of apartheid and its social engineering and use this to justify their mismanagement, corruption, and looting of state resources, whether they are in the public or private sector. They do themselves and our nation a great injustice. Fellow South Africans, those who deny the impact of apartheid to mask their privilege, and those who use apartheid as an excuse to accumulate their privilege, those are the enemies of our nation, and those are the enemies of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. Fellow South Africans, to understand the crisis we find ourselves in and to find some answers to delivering us from this crisis, I would recommend that every South African read the latest report of the South African Statistician General, Dr. Lehoshla, entitled "Whether a Democratic Dividend in South Africa, the Overtone Window of Political Possibilities," published only 2 weeks ago on the 27th of September 2017. It's as recent as we can get. And what does the report say? This report outlines the possible benefits of a demographic dividend for any society. The demographic dividend is having a majority of your citizens within the working age of 15 to 64. This gives any nation more labor resources for production and requires fewer resources to take care of the young and the elderly. This was the case in most of the East Asian and Latin American countries. The report also indicates that the demographic dividend alone cannot produce higher economic growth. In addition, certain socio-economic conditions need to be in place. These include lower unemployment, policies that successfully support economic growth and job creation, good governance, education and training, and healthcare and family planning. The report attributes the success of the East Asian countries to the adoption of these measures. The report goes on to say that by 2010, our potential demographic dividend or working age population had grown to 65%. However, the report also indicates that the supporting conditions to maximize the potential benefits have been sadly lacking. The report goes on to say that a demographic transition in the form of a growing working age population could become a curse rather than a blessing. In the worst case scenario, A demographic transition could translate into an army of unemployed youth and significantly increase social risk and tension. Quoting the National Planning Commission, our government's National Planning Commission in 2012, the report says, if not managed, the perfect window could become the perfect storm. Compatriots, this storm is approaching. The dark clouds are gathering very fast. 23 years after our first democratic elections, inequality has grown, unemployment has also grown, so too has poverty, despite the alleviation of this through social grants. Our economy is either not growing or growing very slowly. Every single day, people are moving rapidly into our urban areas with no prospect of employment, placing huge pressure on government to deliver services from education, housing, sanitation, water, etc. However, service delivery has declined. Corruption is fast becoming endemic. Race relations are deteriorating. Ethnicity is rearing its ugly head. And political competition has turned into political intolerance. We are awash with small weapons that are easily available. You can get them throughout the country. Crime is visibly threatening, and the public perception is one of declining law and order. Here, fellow citizens, lie the seeds for civil war. Our fault lines are many, and there are many among us who recklessly, intentionally, or selfishly plant these seeds for their narrow interests. They go on to nurture them and water them with their hateful rhetoric, oblivious to the fact, or irresponsibly alive to the fact, that setting a match to this cocktail of fault lines will unleash a war that nobody will be able to stop. History is replete with these sad stories, and we should not be added to this list. Let me turn now to what can be done to reverse this grave trend and to ensure that we continue on a path to civil peace and not deteriorate to the path of civil war. Firstly, a reversal requires that we all take responsibility for the efforts needed to reverse this trend. Fellow South Africans, I believe that we all have the same aspirations. We want to be secure, to be free from fear, free from want. We want to live decently, have the dignity of a job, provide our children with a good education, have quality healthcare that is affordable and accessible, and live in an environment where a walk in the park does not feel like a death trap. These aspirations are the minimum expectation that any human being has. However, none of us can be secure until all of us are secure. And unfortunately, 23 years after democracy, the reality of a secure life evades the majority of our people. For them, poverty, unemployment, and inequality is the only reality they experience. Therefore, our most urgent task must be to provide a secure life for those who don't yet have this security. Fellow South Africans, this task cannot be completed overnight. Successive governments since 1994 have made huge progress in tackling the imbalances of the past, and some among us have benefited. However, these efforts were not enough. In 1994, we had about 40 million people in our country, and about 50% of us were urbanized. Today, we have 55 million people, and about 64% of those are urbanized, and around 36% are unemployed. Any politician, including those in the venue tonight, who stands up to get your vote and promises to solve this problem in 5 years will be misleading you. Either because they know that you do not know what the state of our nation is, or worse still, because they do not know what the state of our nation is. This huge challenge is going to take a concerted effort by all of us over the next 20 to 40 years. And we have to start today. If we don't, we will all be caught in this devastating storm that is fast approaching. To avoid this storm, our nation needs a new social compact between all the sectors of our society, the political parties and politicians, the government, the trade unions, the private sector, the media, the religious sector, civil society and the intelligentsia. We all need to come together in a social compact. For this social compact to work, we need far-sighted leadership in all spheres of our society. We need astute political leaders who are alive to the demands of the time and the complexity of these demands. We need leaders who are visionary, who have long-term plans, and the ability to bring a sense of urgency and discipline throughout our society so that those plans can be implemented professionally, effectively, and efficiently. Our nation needs strong political parties and confident political leadership. Weak political parties lead to fragile states. We need a strong ruling party and strong opposition parties. Both are necessary for a vibrant democracy. At present, we must all be concerned at the weaknesses in our political establishment. I cannot emphasize how important it is for the stability of our country that these political parties, all of them, deal decisively with the divisions among their ranks. They need to urgently find each other, compromise, and heal their divisions. Our country is too fragile to deal with these divisions. They must turn the boardrooms of cabinet and parliament into war rooms against poverty, unemployment, and inequality. And not make them look like battlegrounds for narrow party political or factional interests. We need an effective civil service. We have many well-meaning civil servants who are hardworking and who operate professionally and in the best interest of the public at large. Then, there are those who fail to grasp the civil or servant in civil servant. They are among the teachers, policemen and women, officials of various government departments delivering housing, water, sanitation, and many other basic services. It is also in the civil service, among other sectors of our society today, where the cancer of corruption is spreading. Let me say to those thousands of civil servants, and many of you may be sitting here today, when you do not perform your task, when you engage in corruption, and when the millions of our people take to the streets to protest, that protest, believe me, I've seen it before, that protest over time will lead to civil war, and you and your families will also be counted amongst the victims. Now let me turn to the private sector. You are the drivers of economic growth and employment in our country. Alongside government, you have the biggest responsibility to deliver us out of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. It must be evident to you in the private sector, as it is evident to all of us, that as a country we have not yet reached a level of economic transformation that can address poverty, unemployment, and inequality. It must also be evident to you that corporate social responsibility is not economic transformation, nor can it lead to economic transformation. We need the private sector to become active partners in the transformation agenda of our country and not collude in the feeding frenzy of corruption that is eating away at the fabric of our society. Your business cannot be only about profit for yourselves and value for your shareholder. Your biggest shareholder must be the public at large, because without them, you can generate no value for yourselves or your shareholder. The rest of us in civil society, the media, the academic community, the religious sector, the trade unions, all of us have to play a role in ensuring that we secure our hard-won democracy. We need to educate each other objectively about the challenges we face, to continue to hold our leaders accountable, and to build and strengthen a culture of peace, tolerance, and dialogue, the hallmarks of which we as a society had become known for throughout the entire world. Fellow South Africans, we have reached an important crossroad in the young history of our democracy. It is time to work hard so that we can all unite behind our flag, our constitution, and our anthem. We have many challenges, but we also have much to be grateful for. We still have a vibrant democracy. The three arms of our government, the legislature, the administration, and the judiciary still have relative independence from each other, and we need to guard that jealously. We still have a free media, and our right to march and protest is still upheld. These are freedoms many across the world do not take for granted in other parts, and we should certainly not take them for granted in our country. We have a country with amazing natural beauty. We have physical infrastructure that is the envy of many around the world. I've just come a week ago from 4 countries in Europe, and I can tell you, we have first-class infrastructure in this country. Our roads, our airports, our ports are all world-class. We have a financial and commercial sector that rival the best in the world. For a small country, in comparative terms, we have produced world champions. Wade van Niekerk, Caster Semenya, and Chad Leclos, among others, make us proud. South African-born Charlize Theron is at the top of her game. Cape Town and South Africa's favorite comedian, Trevor Noah. He's now one of the biggest talk show hosts in the world. And of course, not forgetting our very own from KwaZulu-Natal, Black Coffee is making waves internationally. And then, of course, fellow South Africans, and I'm glad that you're excited about it, it's a great country that we have. We have a lot to be proud of. And yes, we are probably the only country in the world with 4 Nobel Peace Prize winners, one of whom we celebrate with today. So, compatriots, we have come too far. We have walked too long. We have lost too many patriots. I think of Dulcie September, Steve Biko, Neil Agate, Ahmed Timol, Griffiths and Victoria Mkenge, and your very own Ashley Creel. They and the many, including my own fellow University of Durban Westville students, Pila Ndwandwe, and Lenny Naidu, who stood and marched with us. All these brave South Africans paid the ultimate price for our freedom. They dropped, and they knew that we would pick up the baton and carry on the race to build a better life for all South Africans. 23 years later, we owe it to them, and we owe it to the Arch and his peers to make sure that the colors of the Arch's rainbow get brighter. That we correct our moral compass and stop those who only see the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow and miss the beautiful colors of the rainbow. We need to make sure that the rainbow of hope and prosperity does not only stretch from Table Mountain to the Drakensberg, that it does not rise only among the jacaranda of Pretoria and color the deep beauty of the Blythe River Canyon. Fellow South Africans, compatriots, the rainbow of hope and prosperity must also spread from Constantia to Khayelitsha. It must spread from Umhlanga to KwaMashu, and it must spread from Sandton to Soweto. It is only when the rainbow of hope and prosperity touches each and every South African that we shall all be secure, free, and enjoying civil peace. I thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I must say, wow. Now, Advocate Gounden, I get paid to talk. It's my job. I have to talk. And it's not usual that I'm rendered speechless. And it's not rendered speechless because I don't have anything to say, but it's sometimes you just have to listen. There's a saying in Xhosa, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know how to directly translate it in English, but they say, because you have ears, you have heard. In Xhosa, it says, unendlebe nje, uyeva. Simply meaning that it simply means that you can no longer bury your head in the sand. You have to stand up also and do your part. Ladies and gentlemen, we will give you a chance now to ask one or two questions to our guest speaker today. So what will happen is we'll take a question and we'll have an answer. Would that work for you, Advocate? All right, so is anyone going to be working with, yes. I see we've got a hand up there in the audience there. We start there. I've noted. Yes, thank you for the lights. Noted.
Sorry, I just want to say my question is not actually a question. I just want to say congratulations to the Advocate. I think that's actually one of the best lectures I've ever been to. So very, very well done. It was very inspiring. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for a great lecture. I think it's what we need as a country and as a city. Because just last night, 3 of our police officers were gunned down in Hanover Park. And I'm asking myself the question, what are we not getting as citizens? And you have tonight given us some work to do. We need to turn every boardroom, every playing field into a space where we talk. A week ago, I did a workshop in Philadelphia. It's a community with one entrance, but the most things that goes through that one entrance is the liquor lorry, where our children under 18 are drunk every weekend. So I am asking you to help me. The politicians is not going to help us. It's very clear. We even saw it at the Congress of the DA over the weekend. They're not going to help us. So in what you said tonight, it impacted on me because I'm one of those that were in the struggle. And the struggle continues, as the students at UWC tell me every day. So with the urgency in what you said, what is it that we as South Africans are not getting? Because something we need to change, and we're not working collectively to change that.
Sorry.
Thank you.
It's that gentleman over there, and we've got another gentleman over here, those two. Shall we? Yes, there. Standing up there, thank you. And then we are coming to you, sir, sitting.
Okay, I'm just going to take just 3 minutes of your time, sir. Firstly, I would like to greet all the workers in this room, the securities, the cleaners, and the cooking staff. And everyone who made sure that this event here today becomes a success, because it is through their labor that we are able to gather here today. Secondly, sir, Mr. Vasu, you started your lecture here today with very critical statement. You said between civil peace and civil war, which one did we choose, Tina, up here in South Africa? And me personally, I would like to think that South Africa chose civil war over civil peace. Because in order to be peace in a country there, as is stimulated in this reading, that peace is made out of many ingredients. And amongst those ingredients is fairness. In South Africa, throughout, starting in 1994, that process of TRC was never a fair process, first and foremost, because it is that very same process that made the oppressors and the perpetrators, settlers who are working freely here today, while we still have more than 100 applicators who fought for this freedom here today, who are still languishing in prisons today, even after 20 years of democracy. So South Africa chose civil war over civil peace, because if we choose capitalism, there can never be peace within a capitalist state. Tina here, there will never be peace in a capitalist state, because South Africa in 1994 chose capitalism. Hence, today you have those who are labeled private hands, those private hands who up to this day are still owning up to 80% of the South Africa's economy. Now, there's no fairness in that. Second, before I sit down,
very quick.
Before I sit down, I would like to go to the issue of UWC, because I'm a student in UWC. And today, UWC is one of the adherents of peace in the International Peace Lecture. I find that as hypocritical, and I find that as paradoxical. Why I say that? Because the same UWC who today is advocating for peace is the same UWC that fired, unfairly so, 143 workers.
Okay.
And secondly, the same UWC who today we are saying they want peace. Well, remember, peace is matter of fairness. There's about 40 students who were sleeping on Res Life in a building that was disowned by the same management here, who are here today saying that they are all for peace. There is no peace. I dare say it.
Okay.
That there is no peace in South Africa. There has never been peace in South Africa. And there will never be peace in South Africa up until you address the issues the way that are supposed to be addressed.
Sir, thank you so much.
No, man. And before I sit down, there is a systematic repression against activists.
Give others a chance. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm addressing this to our main speaker, Advocate Vasu Gounden. It's good to listen to intellectuals speaking. I've spent the best part of my life in the township. I've worked 20 years for the city of Cape Town, one of the most racist organizations. And the talk in the township is completely different to what we hear, although what Mr. Gounden said is very truthful. In the township, you get the true talk. And there's a lot of speculation going around. And when a speculation has become too much of a speculation, it becomes a reality. And the reality is, where did all this started? The speculation goes back to the time of Mandela being in jail. The speculation of what went on in the negotiations. The speculation of how did certain people benefit and became rich from all this? There are many speculations, and some of them, as an ANC person, it's embarrassing to mention. And the reality is that people like me that sacrifice a lot of time, a lot of effort in the struggle, like many of the township people, the only thing that we have benefited is that we can vote. Now, a question to Advocate Vasu Gounden. I met you the first time at the University of Durban, Westville, a firing young leader, a young man. I had just come back out of self-exile from New Zealand, and I was on a fact-finding mission. I was impressed by the way young students like you were prepared to take on the security force. If I'm not mistaken, you couldn't even use your office. You were standing outside your office. And I went back to New Zealand with great enthusiasm that I came back. Now I'm asking, where are the leaders? Why aren't they speaking out? Why is everybody covering everybody's backside? That's what I can't understand. Be open, be honest. Why, Mr. Gounden, are leaders not talking out? We sacrificed our life. We never asked for a podium. We've never asked for any wealth. We wanted freedom. We wanted equality. We are not getting it. The rot started when Mandela was in jail, not now.
Thank you, sir. We'll take one more question. Is it this side? One more question, ladies and gentlemen. Wherever the mic is, we'll take that question.
Okay, good evening, everybody.
Please.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My question goes to the advocate. As a young upcoming attorney in South Africa, I am very much concerned with his speech, in particular that whenever he speaks, he excludes and he only makes reference to our fellow South Africans. The Constitution itself states that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. What are we doing as South Africans to protect the rights of migrants, the rights of foreign people who form Africans amongst us Africans? Have we yet addressed the issue, or it is remaining unanswered or shifted sideways, because remember, if you grant someone permanent res to actually stay in South Africa, you are granting them the right to exercise or to stay in South Africa. So why is the right not to vote also granted to foreign national with permanent res? I will ask you to address that issue, Advocate.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, I'd love to give everyone an opportunity. Unfortunately, sir, I have to stop it. Advocate, if you please. Sorry, we are running out of time, and unfortunately, we have to watch our time.
Let me start with the last question. I begged for your indulgence, those who are not South Africans, to address South Africans, because I wanted us to reflect on our problems, not that I wanted to exclude anybody else. I have sat on the commission investigating violence against foreigners, and I know that it is not an easy problem. It's a very complicated issue. It's a complex and complicated issue. Thank you very much. And there are no easy answers to the challenges that we have. The young man who spoke, you are right. If you look at it in the context that we are still in a war against poverty, unemployment, and inequality, then yes, the choices that we made have not taken us out of peace, because peace is not the absence of war. It's the absence of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. Now, what I was alluding to and what I was talking about was the violence that you saw. I was a young student leader, and Lionel, who spoke earlier, said, and I hope I'm still a young man, Lionel. Yes, I was a student leader at the height of our resistance in the country, 1985, 1986, when the apartheid state imposed a state of emergency on us. And then we did not have the same freedoms we have today. We could not assemble the way you can assemble today. We were beaten up, we were tortured, we were jailed, but we were prepared to die for our beliefs, and yes, I am prepared to die today for my beliefs also. So, I think we still have this war, you are quite right, and it is up to you. This is your future. I always want to address young people. I was sitting on the plane coming here to Cape Town, and there was a young student next to me. He had just graduated with a commerce degree, and he was now doing an additional course. And we had a 2-hour conversation on the plane. And I told him, he raised with me the problems of this country. And I said, you know, the Arch, thank you, Arch. You have delivered our freedom. Our generation, our responsibility was to transform this country. We have failed you. But it's a difficult job. We underestimated what it would take in 1994 to reverse the structural imbalances of apartheid and then transform it. We underestimated it. And now our time is coming to an end also, but it's your time. Now you have to make a choice, and I'm going to ask you to be very serious about it. You have to make a choice. It's not about rhetoric. There are very difficult choices that you have to make as young people to secure your future. This is about your future. In 10 years' time, there will be another 5 million people in the country. And 10 years later, another 5 million, maybe 10 million people in the country. Our resources are dwindling. I have stepped into Burundi. I've gone into the rural areas of Burundi and I've worked with the militants. I've sat down in Somalia and worked with the militants. In Syria, in Palestine. I've been to Gaza and I've sat down with members of Al-Aqsa Brigade. I've sat down with the Hamas. It's not a picnic. So let me say, I admire you for having the courage to stand up and to make your point about the fact that yes, the choices we made have not taken us to a point of peace, fairness, truth, justice. And I'm sorry for that. But I hope you won't make the same mistake. I hope that 20 years from now, there won't be a young person standing there and saying to you, you did not give us peace. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Let's build a great country together. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, Advocate Gounden. Just before, ladies and gentlemen, we are starting to wrap up now, but we do have another item coming up from the orchestra. You do not want to miss that. At least I know the name to that one. But for now, can I please call up Dr. Marlene Leroux to give us a thanks of now.
What can we say? We are touched, but it also connects ourselves to our humanity. Because we are only human because of others. And we can only feel the pain of others if we have gone through that pain. A great thanks tonight to our speaker, to remind us once again that we're only 23 years old as a country. There is still so much that we as citizens, and I'm saying citizens, not VIP guests, because none of us are VIP. We are all human beings that makes life. And we must make life for our neighbors, for our next generation, bearable. And to have the necessities of good health care systems and good education. And Tata is here tonight. And the Book of Joy, one of the chapters, it says, nothing beautiful comes without some suffering. And it's so profound. And it's with the Dalai Lama, he wrote this. So Tata, today as a young woman, because in the 80s I sat at your feet, and I was a student of the Anglican Students Association. Yes, at that university, UWCU made me a human being. And that particular, it taught us values to care. It taught us value to stop with our egos. To stop always to show it's you. Starts with an I. And this is what this peace lecture is about. Is to remind us all again that we need to become vigilant. We need to become citizens that's going to care and that's going to cross that road from Manenberg over to Guguletu. If a sister is harmed, I must stand up and not say it didn't happen to me, but it happens to me because it's a sister. If a persons with disability don't have access to the necessary health care and to be able to have a job, we need to say, as citizens of our continent, it's not just about policies and about our constitution. It's about the implementation thereof. And tonight was a reminder of our constitution that we must make a living document. Thank you, Tata, that you've been part of it. There are many of you sitting here tonight, all of you, that we're going to make it work. And tonight I would like to say thank you to a very special lady. She doesn't want to come up. And this lady is our Patricia de Loo. Our mayor, we want to say thank you because you have given this foundation a gift. On Saturday, you're going to give it over and you're going to announce it. But tonight, we want to say to you, thank you for the granary. Thank you for your legacy. The granary is going to be the Desmond and Leia Legacy Foundation Granary, which is next to the District 6 community. And we're going to form part of a community when that granary is where the legacy of the arch through our capable CEO, Humbulelo, is going to be driven with our wonderful trustees, and my little page has fallen now there. Thank you very much. I can't bend because today I have polio and I have post-polio. I can't even bend. But it is so important that we invest in our youth. So Mayor, one of our projects that we're going to start in the granary, that you're giving it to the foundation as a gift for the legacy of the arch, is a youth institute for leadership. Because we need to start with our young people to look at dignity, integrity, and what we imagine with our constitution must be embedded in our young leadership, not in me, because I'm middle-aged. They need now to lead our country. So Mayor, on behalf of Arch and Auntie Leah and the trustees, we would like to thank you. And there's a bunch of flowers for you because we don't have money. So I can't come down, Mayor. There's a bunch of flowers for the Mayor. Yes, I used to toy quite well, no, Courtney. And then our wonderful Ravi. Yes, is Ravi here of Design in Daba? Ravi? He left, okay. But we need to say this. He initiated the arch for the arch at the company garden. And wow, the simplicity of this artwork, it just bowled us all over, because the reason for it is that the pillars of the Constitution is just underneath. So that everybody, the company garden is accessible for every single person. And that is what our Constitution is about. So Ravi, thank you for initiating the Arch for the Arch. To all our dignitaries that is here tonight, we would like to say thank you to all of you. Thank you to the elders that is here. Thank you to all our archbishops. And I would like to say also a very special thank you. Tonight is a thank you and a gratitude. It's also to Dr. Mampela Rampela that also walked the path with us with the foundation. But before the Desmond and Leia Foundation, there was also the Peace Trust. Thank you for the Peace Trust. If there's people of the Peace Trust here, give them a hand. Thank you to them. Then before the Peace Trust, we had the wonderful Impilo Ministries. Wonderful of them also to assist at the arch before we come into the new Desmond and Leia Foundation. Just give them a hand as well. It's gratitude for us where we are. We have the trustees, the previous trustees are also here. I think Professor Pumla is here. Just wave to us. Thank you very much that you are here. Our new trustees is Deresh Ramkles, David Schmidt, Colin Moses, Zandle, Kobe, Nera Naidu, Nikki Mgegashe, and I would like to say thank you to all of you that we can take the foundation to a higher level to serve and to serve our country. We also would like to thank Kumpo that started also as our first CEO of the Desmond and Leia Legacy Foundation. Please just give her a hand as well. To especially also the staff. Thank you so much. Without staff, nothing happens. And we would like to say to them, thank you for standing with the foundation and with that we can proceed with our legacy. I want to end off to say these wonderful two women sitting here tonight, wow. You are our role models. You are my role models. Dr. Nader, thank you so much for just being here and heading up a center at UWC, which is so important for us because spiritual leadership is so vital to guide us, and our interfaith community will have a space at the granary so that we can have a home. And we hope we can join hands in order for us to lead our young people. Thank you for that. To UWC, Dr. Dube, Professor Dube and Professor Pretours, that's not here, thank you for taking hands with us because peace is not just a word. Peace we need to actively practice because peace can become only a word if we say it to others. But peace comes within yourself when you believe in something passionately, but then you do the right thing when the media is not with you. If we are not in touch with ourselves, we are not going to be moved as a nation. To all of you that is here, I would like to call Tandi Tutu up because we would like to give to the Tutu family, just as a nation, a thank you. Arch is at the back. Malia is not here tonight. And we would like, Tandi is representing the children, Naomi, Trevor, Humpo, Marceline is also here tonight. But Tandi, we would like to say to you a special tribute. But before that, I may say that because it's not going to be a sexist remark. You look absolutely fantastic. Yes. We sometimes forget what children must endure when our parents are activists. So tonight, Tandi, and all your other siblings that is not here tonight, we would also like to pay tribute to all of you tonight, to say thank you, because you all have suffered, and you've all has given some of your lives in order for us to have the freedom. Thank you so much, Tandi. I will ask Tandi to say something and then we will end off with something special, and I would like our competent, very much, MC of Cape Talk then to take us to do the final thanks. Tandi.
Thank you. Good evening. Oh, you're all tired of talking, of people talking, right? Good evening. Good evening. Okay, thank you. It actually is a great honor and privilege to stand here on behalf of the Tutu clan, as it were. And it's quite right because the Gumafungash. So that is an honor accorded to me by birthright as the eldest daughter.
Yes.
But it's okay, I won't, stand here forever. I will not be my father's daughter and keep on going ad infinitum. But I would like to say thank you. I was wondering at one point, I was saying, okay, it's my dad's 86th birthday. It's not 80, so you can't do a big hula baloo. It's not 85, it's not a great number to celebrate. So I wonder what's going to happen this year. We have been bowled over. We're starting with the Arch for the Arch ceremony, and then the perfect peace lecture for South Africa at this time. Sometimes you look for those, what do the young people call them? The celebrity speakers. And so you're thinking, okay, who's the celebrity speaker? He's not the regular celebrity speaker, but he was the perfect celebrity speaker for our time. And so we thank you all for being here and for being part of our journey. And I have friends from out of town, and I know my daughter is going to give me a punch if I do not say something about Tutu Desk, because that is what I do. And so because I have a mic in front of me and you are an audience, I will tell you about Tutu Desk. And please go onto our website, www.tutudesk.org, because the thing about it is it's an education thing. And if we don't get education right, we are going to choose civil strife over civil peace. So the sad thing for me is that almost 70 years on in our wonderful country of South Africa, we have educational facilities which were the same that my father was in, and over 3 million children in our country go to school without the benefit of a desk. And so go to our website and find out about us and help make a reality of education in the lives of all our children. Thank you.
And I would like to end off just to say, thank you for all your support. And we will count on your support, because the advocate has spoken about active citizenship, and not to sit on the fence and to say, I told you so. He's going to ask, what am I doing? What am I doing in my community to make a difference? Not what somebody else is supposed to do. Humanity starts with us first. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. For deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday.
Ladies and gentlemen, then it is my responsibility to thank those that have been feeding our souls as they will continue to do so for one last time. And this time I made sure I'd know the name of the song. And so here's Light Calvary from our orchestra.
We have just come to the end of the 7th annual International Desmond Tutu Peace Lecture as presented by Mr. Advocate Vasu Gounden. He touched on a number of areas, including the areas of conflict, saying that there are ingredients of this conflict in South Africa that can result into a civil war as a result of unemployment, poverty, inequality, and the lack of service delivery. But he also showed us that there are some glimmers of hope, due to the things that we have already, our world-class infrastructure, but warned that only if we can start now building what he called a social compact between businesses, government, and trade unions to try to sustain this. And it is an annual lecture, of course, and it will take place again next year around the same time here in Cape Town. And from all of us here at the Arts Cape in Central Cape Town, good evening.